Hello YouTube, Team Mauser coming at you from the bunker, and just wanted to say hi. Haven't done a video upload for a while, but wanted to do one today. We had a incident kind of happen here over the last weekend I wanted to talk about. And I've been working on a new 8mm Mauser rifle, Yugoslavian Mauser. Finally got it back from the shop. Got the scope mounts all tapped and drilled and tapped on it there. Scope mounted on it, took it out, started firing some ammunition through it, and so this was a case that had been fired a total of 3 times. Once as factory ammunition. It was a European manufacturer of 8mm Mauser ammunition. Resized and reloaded it again, and then I resized and reloaded it again. On the third firing, when I pulled it, opened the bolt, pulled it out of the rifle, see this soot mark, and right above it, that's a crack. That case let loose. That case failed, and so something is terribly, terribly wrong that we have to have a look at. And so, normally, guys are inspecting their brass after firings, and they're saying, "Well, I'm looking for, this bright ring business here." And here you can see on this case, this is another case out of the same lot, and right here, you can see this, this right above there where I'm pointing. That is that bright ring that will appear around the circumference of a case when the case is starting to thin. And that case is definitely a case that probably within the next firing is going to let loose, and you'll have something that looks like this or worse happening. And so just very quickly to show you what that case then would look like on the inside, this is a case from the same lot, and what I normally do, at regular intervals through case life, I'll take a handful of the cases out of a lot of cases that I'm reloading, and I'll cut them. I'll take a Dremel tool and I'll cut them apart. And this one here, you can see it's got a dent. It looks like a dent or a shelf. It's actually a thin spot where that case has flowed forward and stretched, and it has gone thin right there. You can actually see over here on this side of the case where that case has definitely thinned on this left side, right about the same level as that mark on the inside of the case. There's definitely thinning. That case is stretching on firing. It's flowing forward, and at this point is where the case is along that line there that you can see on the inside of the case. Looks like a little dark shelf on the inside there. That case is thinning there and is going to fail. And the only weird part about this is this is only the third firing. Usually you don't get this kind of indications on a case for a number of firings. Normally, for a number of firings, this is brass from another brand and another lot, but has also been resized and fired 3 times. You see, it looks pretty good. There's no real ring above the head or anything going on there. It looks pretty fair all the way around. In that case, it could probably be resized and fired without any trepidation at all. And in that case, probably on the inside looks like this. And you can see on the inside of that case, there's no dark stretch mark like here on that case. You see definitely where you can tell where that case is stretched and gone thin. This brass here, the case, both sides of the case appear nice and everything's nice and thick. There's a change of color, but I think that's just simply that lower part of the case is closer to the flash hole there, is right down there by the head, and that probably accounts for a lot of that discoloration there. But it's definitely not any kind of a problem. Like you're seeing on this case, where you're definitely over here having a problem with the thinning of the case wall, where the case is going to let go, and it's going to do this within a time or two. And this is what that, this case probably looked like. It may have looked like this, with a little bit of what they call a bright ring on it when it was reloaded. I kind of doubt it. I always check for that. And so I think it probably looked pretty good. This case is what this case looks like after the third firing. That's not much of a ring. It's not very bright. It's not much of a mark, but it's definitely there. And so, this case let loose on that same line, whereas, these cases here were, obviously in much better shape after that firing. So I don't know, really what the problem was. It could be on me. Could have, with that load, there was definitely some room left in the case. Could have dropped extra half grain of powder in there by mistake. Could be me. Could be entirely on me, which means I got to go back and really revisit my reloading technique and make sure that kind of error is not happening. Never really had a problem with that in the past. Loaded hundreds and thousands of rifle rounds, and I've never had any kind of an overcharged situation or ever even seen anything like this happen, except for one other time. And it was actually on a brand new premium piece of brass that was just resized and fired, resized as new, loaded and fired 1 time. and it let loose. It actually let loose worse than this. It actually, when I worked the bolt and opened the rifle out, the case went flying out, and it actually was broke in two pieces. The front part of the case went flying across and landed out on the concrete at the rifle range, and the head just kind of flopped out of the bolt where it was being held, by the extractor, and just fell out on the bench that I was shooting on. And I had two pieces of it. It actually had blown itself completely apart. So in that case, I'm pretty sure that was a faulty piece of brass. Could have been an overcharge. I kind of doubt it in that particular instance. It was a different rifle. I was shooting compressed loads. There really wasn't a lot of room for extra powder. And check all my cases every time as I'm reloading. And I would think that the idea is that you would notice an overcharge, especially in a case like that where you're shooting a compressed load where the powder load's already creeping up into the neck of the case anyway. It's possible to get extra powder in there, but it would be a lot easier to see, and so I kind of doubt that was the case. But it could have been. It could have been in that case there was an overcharge, and that's why that case blew. That could definitely be the case here, because all of these are fired. I don't have any of these reloaded ammunition to pull and check to see what the charge in them is. I do have, this is a different batch loaded with the same load, fired at the same time. It's a different batch of brass. I did have half a dozen of these left when I came home from the range, so I pulled the bullets, weighed the powder charges, and in the 6 I had left out of the 20 or whatever it was that I loaded out of this Primo brass, all those loads were right on the money. So if this was an overcharge situation, it was kind of a one-off, which is still, it's bad. One-offs will kill you. And so, but I kind of doubt it, because here's another case that's definitely shown that it's ready to go too. I think it's a different problem. This was factory brass, or this was factory ammunition from a European manufacturer. Again, I'm not going to name them because I don't want to put something on them that actually was something with a reloading problem that was my mistake, not theirs. But the one thing I will say is that European 8mm Mauser ammunition is loaded a lot hotter than American ammunition. I've seen videos where guys online are actually firing this very load that I had from as a box of factory brass out of their 8mm Mausers, and several times guys are like, wow, that's hot. That's a hot load. And I would agree. When I fired that factory ammunition and inspected the primers in the back of the case, definitely flattened. The flattest cases, the flattest primers I have ever seen on a rifle load, especially on a rifle load that's in this family, 8mm, 30-06, 270, 243, 308. All they're all based off the same cartridge. They're all based off the same case, and they all have the same size head. And so I've never seen cases that had primers that were as flat as this factory ammunition after I fired it. I really don't recall the bolt lifts being heavy. As I say, it's a rifle that I've not really fired that many times, so maybe as time goes on I'll realize that, oh yeah, those bolt lifts were heavy. That ammunition was showing more than one problem, but I don't really recall having a great deal of trouble, getting the bolt to lift and getting those cases extracted and ejected. I don't think that was a problem, even with the hotter, quote unquote, hotter factory loads. And so, I think, I think something else was in play here. I suspect it because either, the top two things on the list are headspace of the rifle is wrong. Went and got headspace gauges. Bolt will not close on a field gauge, and so this rifle, because the bolt will not close on a field gauge, that tells me that the headspace on this rifle is acceptable. There's not a problem with that particular rifle's chamber. It is not too long. It is not causing this overstretching in being too long with excess headspace. That field gauge, the rifle would not close on a field gauge if the chamber had excess headspace. So that's not the problem. The other problem could be, maybe the brass is just faulty. Maybe it's brass that's not up to snuff compared to some of the other brands. As I say, this is a Primo brand here. These cases are costing me $1 a piece, and that's not even the most expensive ones out there. You guys at Reload know that, but that's still that's a Primo price for brass, and $1 a piece is these ones right here. It's as I say, that's a Primo case that's been fired 3 times, and it looks like what I would expect it to look like on the inside. Not when I was firing my hand loads, out of both of these, I wasn't really seeing, flattened primers anymore. My loads, I never really load that hot for anything, and so, I didn't suspect any problems. They say it was only being fired the third time. All the cases looked good, so I just resized them, fired them again, and so, you were down to, okay, is it a headspace problem? If it was a headspace problem, the problem should have shown up before the third firing, I would think, but maybe not. So okay, was it a headspace problem? No, I've gone back and tested the headspace with a Forester headspace gauge. You really can't buy anything better than Forester, and I followed all their instructions, and pulled all the Midway videos, all the Brownells videos off the internet, and there's tons of instructions out there how to check your headspace, and a lot of times it's in a bolt action rifle, and a lot of times they're showing you exactly how to check your headspace in a Mauser rifle. There's certain things you have to do to make sure with that style of bolt and chamber, to make sure you're getting an exact headspace reading, with that field gauge. And so in this case, did all that, double checked it, and doesn't appear to be a problem. The bolt barely drops on a field gauge, so it's not even close. It's not like it comes down halfway and stops. That bolt barely stops from fully open, and you start to try and close it and it jams up. It's not going anywhere. The headspace on that rifle is perfectly well within SAMI spec. So the headspace is not the problem. Brass could be the problem, faulty brass. Maybe the brass is brittle, and that's why it aged early. As I say, this is a case that was on the inside of the case from the same firing, showing the same sign, showing this shelf right here on the inside here. Definitely a problem. This is what that case would look like on the outside, with this shiny spot, this shiny ring around the diameter, around the circumference of the case. That's showing what, that's the same bulge from the stretching. It's pressing against the inside of the chamber in an exaggerated fashion and stretching, and that's what's causing that bright mark to show up on that brass right there. That's the case where the stress is coming to a head, and that's where the case is going to fail, and that's where this case did fail, right here on that one. So that's a problem. I still take it on me. It could have been an overcharge. Very easily could have been an overcharge. That's actually probably the most likely thing. But in my own experience, all you can do from there is just redouble your efforts. Make sure that your reloading practices are surgically and accurate, and up to the level of some process that they would have at NASA, to make sure that that charge that is going in that case is exactly what should be in there, right down to the grain, or excuse me, right down to the kernel of powder, not even the tenth of the grain. I'm measuring, I'm trying to measure, right down to, individual kernels of powder to get the exact same loads every time when I'm reloading for a rifle like this. So yeah, I just got to redouble that. And if it was an overcharge situation, hopefully, would avoid that in the future, because you don't want that. That's terribly unsafe. It could cost you a hand, it could cost you your eyesight, it could cost you your face, it could cost you your life, or somebody, even worse, somebody standing next to you. It could be seriously hurt or even killed if a case lets loose like that and the rifle lets loose. So we're left with a couple other things. As I say, it could be faulty cases. It could be another problem with the rifle, which older antique military rifle. It could be, the chamber seems to be fine. They don't seem to have excessive head space in that chamber by measurement, but maybe maybe the throat's tight. Maybe the throat is cut tight. It would be kind of unusual, but it certainly probably wouldn't be unheard of. And these military rifles aren't very, they're not known for being precision in terms of their manufacturing. They're known for being very good, but there's a lot of things sometimes with those rifles. You find weird stuff. You find bores that aren't drilled on center. You find bores that aren't drilled straight. You find bores that kind of twist to one degree or another. You find bores that are out of spec. They're supposed to be at 1 bullet diameter, and you actually find that they're, when you slug them with these military surplus rifles from the First and Second World War, that that particular barrel from that factory on that particular day, they were making them oversized, or they were making them a little undersized, and it might not even be the whole length of the barrel. It might just be part of the barrel that's not being reamed out to the right diameter. It could be, like I say, it could just be the throat. It could be a couple inches of the barrel on down the way somewhere where for some reason it's just undersized. That will cause an overpressure situation. Your mounts have been firing a bullet that's too big down the barrel because the barrel's too small at one point, and so you get an overpressure situation, which could result in something like this. So my only recourse at this point is to just simply go back, reload another round of ammunition. Now I have pitched all the brass from this lot. All this brass has started as factory ammunition. I've cut 6 or 8 of them apart that look, and I think I cut 8 apart. 6 of them look like this. So that brass lot, for whatever reason, is either it's faulty brass, or I was screwing up, overcharging all those cases. That's why I don't think it was an overcharge. I could see me overcharging a case every once in a while out of thousands and thousands of cases, yeah. But there was like, out of 8 cases that I cut, 6 of them look like this. Yeah, I highly doubt that I overcharged 6 cases out of 20. I just don't see it. But could be, so I have to assume maybe it was me, and I have to proceed accordingly and redouble my efforts to make my reloading practices just as accurate and cinched down, and as I say, NASA tight. Make sure that those type of things aren't happening. And either that or the brass is bad. So okay, that means either way, the brass is at the very least the brass is damaged. It's ready to fail, a lot of it. So chuck the whole lot. And I do that anyway, but usually I don't have to do it until the brass has been fired, 6 or 7 or 8 times, and you start to see, you start taking a Dremel tool and cutting it apart, and you start seeing stuff like this, and so that's a sign. Hey, that brass needs to go. You need to just get some new brass and start over again, because that brass has reached the end of its life, and brass will reach the end of its life. You'll shoot it enough, and it'll just eventually get to the point where it's going to fail the next time, or it's going to fail soon. It's not worth any risk in having that happen. So chuck it, get rid of it, start over again. And so if I do all those things, and I'm absolutely sure the ammunition is tight, and I've got that all down, and I'm still seeing problems where cases are aging prematurely after a couple 3 firings. I'm getting stuff that looks like this with the bright ring, and I'm getting this, and I'm getting flattened primers. Still that tells me that somehow there's another reason for the overpressure, and that goes back to the rifle possibly at that point. When I reloaded these factory brass here that were factory ammunition, and my charge, when I reloaded them, the 2 times I reloaded them, the charge was significantly reduced from what would be max pressure in the manual. I never load up to max pressure, especially with a new rifle, especially the first couple loadings. I don't even come close to being at max pressure. I'm probably a whole grain below at least. Within what the manual says is a safe minimum load, but I'm not pushing it to see how close I can get to that maximum load right off the bat at all. So those loads, the next 2 times I fired them, were very much reduced loads. That's not proper terminology. They weren't reduced loads, but they were loads that were nowhere near maximum. A reduced load is something else entirely. It's not a load that you would normally be making and firing in your rifle, except for very specific purposes. And so these were hand loads using data out of the manual, but those manuals show you what the maximum load is, that you should never exceed, and these loads were significantly within a safety range less than that. For that reason, it's a new rifle, it's a new load. You don't want to be doing crazy things with it until you're sure what's going on with that rifle. And so anyway, that's that. So again, just be very, very careful, especially when you're shooting those old military surplus rifles. Take them to a gunsmith and make sure that headspace is right. Make sure that if you're doing reloads, make sure that those are all tight. Consult a couple different manuals. Really look and see what's going on. Everything's online now. You can get all your reloading manuals. You can reload all your manuals down as a Kindle these days, and have it right on your phone. You can check everything, without having to go out to the internet to some forum and ask some bumpkin like me, what's the load supposed to be, and they give you some data that you don't know where they got it. You can get it right out of the manual, and you can get it right out of several manuals, and you can double check it. And I say is achieve that NASA level of precision with your hand loads, which you should be doing. And so I just got to proceed with that. You keep an eye on the brass, and you know, as I say, once I, when I was reloading those loads, at those loads that I had chosen, I wasn't seeing flattened primers. I wasn't seeing any other pressure signs. I was definitely not getting any difficult or hard bolt lifts, you know, no excessive recoil or report. You know, wasn't seeing any of these bright rings on any of the brass after it was fired. The first time it was reloaded, and then the second time it was reloaded and fired is when we started having these problems. Is when they showed up, you know. So the brass was, for some reason, aging prematurely, and so it's either an overpressure situation with a factor that's attributable to something going on with the rifle itself, or it's something going on with this brass. Either the brass was damaged on that first hot factory loading, which was definitely hot. It was definitely hot, and by all indications. At the time it was fired, it was hot, and at the time that I inspected the brass afterwards, in terms of the flattened primers, which were extremely flattened, you know, and so my feeling is it was possible that those cases were aged in that initial firing because of the extreme hotness of that load. It just simply aged the case. Instead of aging it, you know, one firing, it aged it 5 or 6 firings, and that's, you know, you got kind of premature failure here, you know. So anyway, just be careful with all that, especially shooting those surplus military rifles. They're a lot of fun, but they can have their own sets of problems. Just, you know, again, just be safe, be very safe, be very careful with what you're doing when you know, start dropping powder in your own cases, shoving bullets in them, stick them in your rifles. You could blow your face off. So just, you know, watch what you're doing, and be well advised. So thank you, and we'll see you again next time.